Now, another thing we spoke about on the tour, well, we spoke about last week ahead of the tour, was that would Liverpool sign a centre-half, obviously, before that tour? Now, that doesn't look to have happened, and obviously there's still time for them to do that. And just like we're seeing with Hugo Ekitike, a centre-half could travel in there. But we've seen that Lucas Stevenson's going on the tour. We know Andy Robertson's going on the tour, as well as the other two left-backs, because there's been no movement on there. So is it safe to say that you think it'll just be a case of doing what happened at Preston, where these guys are just going to fill in around Virgil van Dijk, Ibrahima Konate, and Joe Gomez?
Yeah, exactly that. I think the ideal situation for Liverpool would have been to have a new centre-half in for this pre-season tour, but obviously they're doing a lot of other business and you can't get everything you want. I think, at the moment I get the feeling, or certainly I talked to someone about this kind of last week or so, early last week, was that, they're waiting to see what happens with the Mark Gay situation, because Liverpool want to sign Gay, and if they can get him, they don't want to miss out on that opportunity. But Crystal Palace have progress they need to make in terms of signings, decisions they have to make in terms of how much they value the player, and of course whether they want to keep him. And of course with Crystal Palace, quite a lot's up in the air for them at the moment in terms of which European competition they're going to be in, all the craziness around their part ownership. So they're in a tricky situation. So I think that is putting the brakes on this a little bit. But Liverpool want to be there if Gay's on the market. They want it, and the fee is going to be okay. They want to be part of that. If not, the plan is to kind of revert to the usual profile that they were probably going to sign in this window, which was someone who's a little bit younger than Gay. But like I say, a lot is riding on Gay and whether that's feasible. So we just kind of wait and see on that, really. It's, still a lot of the window left. Liverpool aren't absolutely desperate at the moment. They can start the season with Konate there, can't they, and Van Dijk, and that would be absolutely fine. And Gomez is back up. Endo can play there. Gravenberch can. I think they're absolutely comfortable about that. But it's just wait and see on the Gay situation, really. That feels absolutely key to everything that happens to Liverpool at centre-half.
One of the exits that you expected, I think, listening to the show through the sort of spring, was that Joe Gomez was one that you kind of expected that he may move on. I'm guessing on the back of what you just said there that we're no longer expecting that. We're expecting he may stick around this season, because I don't know how much more upheaval Liverpool could go under this year than what they're already doing by bringing in all these players and with the exits still to come.
Yeah, one of the things that kind of I did expect it coming into this, that there would be a little bit more kind of interest in Joe Gomez and more potential for him to leave. What I would say, I won't rule it out yet, because I just think there's potential for something to happen there. I think it feels a lot less likely than it did a couple of months ago, that's for sure. But you just never know what's going to happen in the window. Newcastle want a centre half, and they kind of maybe they kind of got an interest in Gay still. But if they miss out there, do they maybe look back to Joe Gomez? There's so much potential for things to change there. But it does feel like I always got the impression that maybe one of the two centre halves would leave out of Gomez and Quansah, and that maybe Gomez was the more likely one. But obviously now Quansah is gone. It's kind of like you say, how much upheaval can you really have in that back line without doing damage to the team and the ability to start the season well? I think Liverpool would be a bit more reluctant now, and they'd ask for a really, really decent fee for Gomez if anyone did come in. So yeah, one of those, unfortunately not too many kind of concrete answers you can give on that. I would say feels less likely than it did a couple of months ago, but it's the transfer window, and there's an awful lot of time yet to be making anything kind of concrete predictions on this one, I'd say.
And on the exit, so there's a comment on the screen from the real Cal Jones there. Sorry, I can't get to reading all these comments. There's so many of them. I do apologize. We're up to 2,200 people watching this now, so that is going to mean more comments. I'm trying to get through as much. I'll read out a couple of them just now as we're talking about the exits, and the comments are relevant to it. There's the real Cal Jones is saying we all expected Gomez and Tsimikas to go, but looks like they're staying. Obviously, we've just discussed Gomez, and we'll ask David about Tsimikas in a moment. There's another one here from the coach Parker, who I believe, I'm going out on the wing here, I believe is David Parker, who I was with in Madrid a few years ago now for the Champions League final. And at that time, and I think maybe the case that David lives in the Far East, so maybe he is going to be able to go and see a couple of these friendlies. I'm sure he could let us know in the comments. But David says, I missed the start of the show. Are there any updates on Harvey? I read somewhere that West Ham were looking at him, but maybe just a rumor. And of course, the other one that's materialized in the last week is we know there's been at least one Luis Diaz bid from Bayern Munich. There may have been another one since. My info may not be correct on that. But is there any movement on any of those in terms of Tsimikas, Elliott, or Luis Diaz?
Yeah, Simicast again, one that I kind of there was interest in him last summer, and again it made me feel like he would be in a position to maybe leave this summer, but that doesn't seem to be coming to anything. And at the moment, Andy Robertson feels like the more likely to go, because I think he's made clear to Liverpool that, you know, playing time wise, he wouldn't be against a departure, and he was open to the idea of the Atletico move. And I think people his side of things are not ruling anything out yet in terms of potential departure. So it does just feel like Robertson's edged ahead there, and that Simicast is maybe of the mindset that he's happy to stay a little bit longer. And maybe Robertson, we could see some activity over the remaining few weeks of the window. So again, it's one where there's a long time left. I think in an ideal world, Liverpool don't want to have three options at left back there. So I'd say Andy Robertson is the one to keep an eye on in terms of potential departures there. For Harvey, the word is kind of his side of things that maybe West Ham is not the ideal move. You know, that they're not absolutely dead set on that one. I think there's a possibility of clubs maybe higher up the table coming in for him. So again, you know, maybe that one's not nailed on, and keep an eye on who else shows a little bit of interest. I know that previously there's been interest in the likes of Brighton, Newcastle as well. And I think those sorts of moves would maybe appeal a little bit more. So yeah, let's keep an eye on that one. He's one, again, he's in a position now where I very much expect him to leave with the limited opportunities he's going to get. So we wait and see for clubs to kind of firm things up and actually make a move. I know it's so frustrating. You can't offer too much certainty, but at this stage of the window, that is just quite difficult, really, with those ones. But yeah, I would say if you look for certainty, I'd say it's looking pretty certain that Harvey will leave. But as I say, maybe not West Ham, although that interest is there. I think maybe someone higher up the table at the moment feels a little bit more likely.
And on Luis Diaz?
Yeah, so just waiting for a second bid for Bayern. I mean, that literally could come in the next 24 hours or so. We're ramping towards that, is the impression I get. So that initial bid rejected. Liverpool want more money. And I think, you know, Bayern have got some money burning a hole in the pocket. They've got a vacancy on that left-hand side with Sane having gone. Musiala's injured as well, so another attacking option lost for them. So yeah, I expect them to come back with a bigger bid. And again, we wait and see if Liverpool will accept it or not. I think the numbers they've put on him around 100 million euros. I think Liverpool accept they're not going to get that, but definitely closer to that than the last bid was is the expectation. And so Bayern's second bid could be every chance that gets accepted. And like I say, I'd expect that in the next few days or so.
But it's safe to say it's very much an illusion that Luis Diaz is not for sale.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Liverpool are right to say kind of what I would say, people want to kind of take it absolutely at face value, either one way or the other kind of thing, in terms of it's not either that, that he's not for sale. Obviously, that's clearly not true that he's not for sale, but equally, he isn't for sale either. It's not like Liverpool are like, we have to get this guy out the door, we're sick of him or whatever. They just know that he could bring in big money. He's got 2 years left on his contract. He's keen to go, and they don't want to give him another deal. So it probably could work for everybody, but they really aren't kicking him out the door. So it really is on Bayern to kind of come up with a fee where you go, oh, well, if you're going to give us that much for a player who's got 2 years left, he's this age, then yeah, we're absolutely happy to take that. So they're not booting him out the door by any means. And, pressure is on Bayern to come up with that big bid, and it's got to be bigger than the last one. So we're just waiting for them to actually do that. But as I say, feels like we're getting towards a situation where that happens over the next couple of days.
And there were links to him again. I don't know how tentative, but there were links to him again from Saudi. They've never really gone away since there was talk that Luis Diaz may be available. The inclination seems to be that he perhaps doesn't want that move. He would prefer to stay in Europe and to keep his career going at the top level. Do you think that the Saudi option remains there as a fallback for him? Is that something that could still happen if that second offer from Bayern doesn't materialize in the way the club expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had this impression all kind of through the summer, really, is that his preference would be to stay in Europe, which is because if he'd given the green light to Al Nassr, they would have come in with a massive bid already. So they are really keen on doing a deal, but the player hasn't given the green light for them to do that. And the reason is because he would prefer to stay in Europe. So if we get to the end of the window, Barca can't put together the money because that's never going to happen, is it? Bayern aren't able to do it. They aren't able to get to a fee that Liverpool would like. then it's going to be up to the player whether he says to the Saudi clubs, okay, now you can come in for me. I'm going to accept the move. But that definitely hasn't happened yet, which is why we're seeing European clubs going head to head for him. It's almost like a fallback option for him late in the window.
Yeah, we'll see how the plot thickens on these outgoings. I mean, we haven't seen really any outgoing since the new financial year started, since this PSR period began. The last sales, the Kwanzaa, the Kelleher, they were all, and the Trent, I suppose, which is money that still came in. That's all part of the last PSR calculation. So we've not seen anything in this new one. But then equally, apart from this Ekitike one, which is materializing today, there hasn't been really any incomings in this period either. So as you keep mentioning, it's still actually very early in the window, even though it feels late because the team are playing again and there's different things happening in terms of transfers, rumors. It's all ramping up to a crescendo probably now, but it's still actually early in terms of getting deals done, finalizing deals. That's still a process that's ongoing and will be for the next couple of weeks, even while Liverpool are there. I mean, we mentioned Diaz. There would be nothing to stop Diaz flying back if suddenly an offer is accepted from Bayern Munich. I mean, it's a small world in some ways these days.
Yeah, exactly that. So, they can just go at any time. It's like you say, and there is such a long time left in this window. You got to get through the entirety of August before we get there as well. So we'll be getting to the point where the season has started and transfers in and out are possible, really. So it's there's no kind of rush. I think Liverpool, quite clearly, they probably have to make some sales as well because they're spending money like it's going out of fashion. But yeah, the expectation is that they will, and there's confidence on Liverpool's side that they're going to sanction a few big sales along with all the incoming business that they're doing. So yeah, we just wait for those clubs to come in with the big offers.
Yeah, just on the money side that David mentioned there, I'm doing a podcast in about an hour and 15 minutes with Mo Chatra. Obviously, Mo Chatra studies Liverpool's finances and analyzes those. So that's Money Talks, and I'll be doing that live with him on this channel at 3 p.m. UK time. So an hour and 18 minutes or so, I'll be back and I'll be with Mo. And Mo released an article on our Substack yesterday. It was alwaysliverpool.com. And Mo is confident that Liverpool still have plenty of money to spend, which I'm sure is music to everyone's ears. But it is, we have to underpin that with what David just said. It is still reliant on sales. Those sales have to be made, and they have to be made at the value that Liverpool deem acceptable, because that affects not just the books, but affects their plans of what they might still do in this window in terms of income. And so it's important. And we are going to move to incomings because so many names have been mentioned in these comments, and I've been kind of leaving these comments out because I know we were going to come and talk about this, but we need to talk about incomings. And the big one, obviously, David, we spoke about it last week and we thought nothing would come of it, and we probably still think we had a couple of private discussions as well during the week about this one, is Alexander Isak. Now, we thought maybe one or the other in terms of Ekitike or Isak. That was a big talking point. Liverpool have now seemingly pulled the plug on Ekitike. On Saturday, we know that Isak didn't travel to Glasgow with Newcastle. We saw Eddie Howe's comments, which I don't know about you, I didn't find them very definitive in terms of not for sale at any price. It seemed like some of this may have gone above Eddie Howe's head now. Maybe it's a ownership level. Are Liverpool still remotely in with a shout of signing Alexander Isak? Is this completely over? Can fans just move on, accept that Ekitike is now our number 9? And it was almost, there was a couple of things I put out when Newcastle were linked to both Ekitike and Isak. And the amount of posts, I wrote one, I'm sure maybe you wrote one, and certainly others did, not in a cat and hills chance that those two are playing for the same club. No way can Eddie Howe make that work tactically. And of course, now that everyone thinks Liverpool may be in with a chance of Isak, oh yes, we could see him playing here and him playing. And it just shows how we manifest things in our own mind to what we want to see as a conclusion to this. Where are we with Alexander Isak, do you think?
Well, to be honest, we're in the exact same position we were at the start of the window, which is that nobody at Liverpool is saying absolutely no chance of this happening. So I find that interesting. I mean, everybody wants this to happen, so everyone will maybe take that as kind of, oh well, they're definitely in for him. But I don't know. I've kind of had, I don't know. It's with Isak, it's kind of like I say. I just think they would have concretely ruled it out at this point if it's not a possibility. So we kind of, it feels like there's something maybe still there, but I think all the kind of question marks are still there in terms of, like you say, how do you fit Ekitike into that? How does that work exactly? I just don't really understand really how you would justify spending that much on 2 centre forwards. And you can talk about rotation in the games, etc. But is Ekitike moving to Liverpool to spend quite a bit of his time on the bench because Isak's so good. I'm not so sure really. So I was skeptical about this signing or the possibility of it for quite a while, really, coming into this window. So it's probably easy to sit back and maybe say that's still the case, really. And maybe it just feels very, very unlikely that Liverpool are going to sign him. But it's I mean, there's that aspect of it as well, the Frimpong aspect to be. But like I say, I think someone at Liverpool would happily rule this out if there was nothing in it. But I think maybe the most fascinating aspect of this all really actually is that, and I've not talked about this anywhere yet. Someone at Liverpool put it to me that last week so much of the Isak noise was coming from maybe the Newcastle side of things, and the reason for that was that Newcastle realised that they were going to miss out on Ekitike, that Liverpool had swept in and they were going to get him, and they wanted to kind of save face in a way, I guess, by saying, well, look, this is, okay, well, they've got Ekitike, but look, we're keeping hold of our crown jewels despite the fact they've approached us. So it wasn't necessarily that Liverpool had come in a really hard way to get Isak from Newcastle. It was that Newcastle maybe wanted to look like they hadn't, okay, yes, we've missed out on Ekitike, but we've still kept Isak, and that's our aim now. I really struggle to see a world where you are playing a game where you do that in PR terms and you put that out there and you want that to be known that you fought off Liverpool, and then later in the window you sell him anyway to Liverpool. That makes me skeptical about it, really. And as I say, I think this just looked like a really difficult deal to do for a long time. And maybe nobody at Liverpool is ruling it out on the basis that maybe Newcastle will come to them late in the window and say, we can't get any deals done. We probably want to cash in now. And Liverpool will say, yeah, it's worthwhile for us. But I think when you feel like you've won that PR war of keeping your crown jewel, to then go crawling to Liverpool and sell him later in the window, are Newcastle likely to do that? My feeling personally is no, but that's just my opinion. I just struggle to see them doing that. So that's why I'm, as much as no one's ruling it out at Liverpool, I still personally, I find it very, very hard to see, to be honest.
Well, just to pull you back in, obviously, could the mitigating factor here be that Newcastle didn't expect the players' reaction to be quite as negative to stay in at Newcastle as it appears to be now? We're only going by Eddie Howe's comments and what we're hearing in rumours and things like that. We can't know to what extent Isak has thrown his toys out the pram or got agitated by this transfer talk. What we do know is that a statement circulated in the press last week. I don't know if you were involved in the circulation, but the statement that came out that Liverpool have approached Newcastle with a view to paying up to £120 million for Alexander Isak. That sort of thing doesn't normally come out. You don't normally hear stuff. So I'm assuming from what you've said that's come from the Newcastle side rather than from the Liverpool side. No one's briefed you directly from the club that was a thing. So have Liverpool perhaps not wanted that to come out? Is that what we're saying?
I don't think it's not necessarily that they didn't want it to come out. I think a lot it's, the way it was put to me was that was Newcastle driven, that they wanted it out there, that they'd rebuff this approach and that this guy was not for sale and they were playing, playing hardball with Liverpool. And the reason for that, the justification for that, the kind of thinking behind it was that it maybe makes them look better despite the fact they've missed out on the number one target. Well, we've still got our main man and we won't let Liverpool have
him. And that appeases the fans.
Exactly. And so if you're going to play that game and that's the PR war that you want to play, surely you don't then go and sell him to Liverpool at any point in the window. And I think this has gone above Eddie Howe. I think the player might be frustrated, but I don't want to get involved in speculation on that front. But I think it's gone above Eddie Howe. That's my feeling, is that Newcastle, in terms of just a face-saving exercise, will not allow Isak to leave the club in this window. Certainly not to Liverpool. That's just the feeling I get around this. And at the end of the day, that's not a bad thing for them, because, I mean, why wouldn't you want to keep one of the best strikers in the world that, even if you can just keep him for one more season and they have a decision to make then when he's 2 years out from the end of his deal. But, the players joined them and signed a 6-year deal, didn't he? So he put himself in this position. And even if he is frustrated, he can only be so frustrated for so long, because, he's maybe got to accept that he's got to get his head down and fulfill at least another year of his contract and then see where they go. So, I think Newcastle playing games. I think Liverpool maybe playing games. I think Isak's camp playing games. It's all a bit of a mess. But as I say, what I understand around this situation, it doesn't feel to me like Newcastle would turn around and suddenly sell him after doing that, after kicking up so much fuss around the Ekitike stuff.
It does surprise me that Eddie Howe wasn't empowered to say 100% this is over.
Yeah.
Liverpool. That's the one thing. He had the opportunity to do that at Celtic Park on Saturday. He didn't do it. He even mentioned he can never be 100% sure. So they're like what you said. That's what tells you that this is above Eddie Howe. There's no he's almost just become a spokesman for the public-facing spokesman for what's going on, without being able to say as much as either he would like or the fans would probably like to hear. Because I noticed Newcastle fans collectively lost their heads at that on Saturday. It was quite the place, because I know Luke Edwards, obviously in the Telegraph, he's put a piece out this morning basically kind of explaining his side of it, that Newcastle, the stance has never changed. Newcastle are never saying this play, and I almost feel for Luke Edwards' future as a journalist if Isak does leave that club this year, because I don't think he'll be able to stay as the Newcastle correspondent.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the nightmare of journalism, by the way, but because as well, people on the Newcastle side will tell fibs, people on Liverpool side will tell fibs, agents will lie to you constantly. So there's an awful lot to go on, and sometimes you got to use your instincts and try and wade through that. Sometimes you get it horribly wrong by saying you don't think that Frimpong's going to sign for Liverpool. These things. I mean, it's just really tricky, but. You just try and use your instincts as best you can and the available information. And as I say, I think that stance from Newcastle is firm, both publicly and privately, that they wouldn't sell unless it was insane money, like 150 million. I don't think Liverpool will go that high. They've just signed Ekitike for big money as well. It's and as I say, a lot of the noise was coming from the Newcastle side that was there last week. So I had all those things together, and my judgment as a journalist, and you guys can use your own judgment and maybe come out with a different answer. But to me, just would feel like the biggest surprise ever if Isak ends this window as a Liverpool player. But let's not rule out things in the future.
We need to finish off by talking about a couple of the other players linked. Some of these links are quiet, some of them are still kind of teetering in the background, and others may not come to anything at all. But I'm going to focus on the names that are still doing the rounds. Obviously, we have briefly spoke about Mark Gay on the show already, and the fact that Liverpool haven't pulled the trigger on that one yet, but may still be in a position to do so, and it could probably happen quite quickly if they decide that they want to do that. You mentioned obviously that the profile could be a younger centre half. That was their original their plan before this Gay opportunity, and being opportunistic around that materialized. Are there any younger centre halves that you think that, and I know there was talk about Leoni from Parma and that, I saw some stuff on that last week. Is there any talk about younger centre halves that are kind of out there that people should be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, so a couple I mentioned in a piece I wrote a few weeks back on Substack, which was kind of Leoni was one of them. Kouliarakis is a name that keeps popping up, and again, he fits the profile. I know they'd been watching Diamande at Sporting a while back, but that doesn't seem to have advanced into anything necessarily. So, and by all accounts, Crystal Palace might be in for him as a Gay replacement. So, I mean, that makes sense, I guess. And they are good at making signings. So he's someone that maybe we watch. With Lekeba, again, been in contact with his camp fairly recently and never been given any massive encouragement that Liverpool are progressing on that. I think he will be incredibly expensive as well. I believe his release clause is an awful lot of money, and I think he doesn't necessarily kind of... I think, if you are signing that young centre-half, you maybe go into that kind of crazy money that Lekeba would maybe ask for. I'm not so sure. And maybe he would expect a few more minutes. So, it's not like the really young profile that they're looking for. So, yeah, with the Lekeba, I've not been given massive encouragement. But, there's loads of names out there, isn't there, of young centre-halves doing well in Europe. And that's just a couple who I know of. But there will be, that's not to say that's the entire shortlist. I'm sure there'll be some surprising names out there as well. I mean, Hato actually, sorry, just to, exactly in that comment, definitely been watched by Liverpool, definitely fits into that profile. So he is 100% one to keep an eye on alongside those others if Liverpool don't get Gay.
The next one that's, again, there was supposedly a meeting in New York that Liverpool attended where he's on his holidays. And this is very supposed dependent on whether Luis Diaz does exit the club, is Real Madrid's Rodrygo. We spoke about this last week. We said we very much thought it was agent talk around Pina Zahavi. And that was kind of the stance that everyone was taking, I think, around that time. But those links haven't stopped. They've continued. There was allegedly this meeting in New York that Liverpool attended with Pina Zahavi. And Liverpool are apparently one of the clubs interested in buying Rodrygo, who very much appears to be for sale. I mean, he didn't take part in Real Madrid's Club World Cup campaign, and it doesn't seem like he's going to be a pick for Alonso. He does seem disorientated a bit, I suppose, with Vinny Jr. also being there on the left side, and Kylian Mbappe also favouring that position. So as good a player as he is, he does seem to have become the odd man out. What do you think about that link?
Yeah, it feels like a little bit more coming to it now. Than, like I said, we spoke about it, didn't we? And it just felt at that time like a little bit of agent talk. But I guess now it's starting to feel like Liverpool are just kind of laying the foundations. Not necessarily to say this is the guy we 100% sign, but I feel like there's been contact now on the player side just to check. I mean, you couldn't rule out maybe Anthony Gordon, who there's been interest in for coming in to play that left-hand side. And maybe Newcastle would be slightly more willing to sell him than they would Isak. So he's an option, particularly as the homegrown issue there. But I'd say that Isak is at least Rodrygo is at least kind of someone they're taking a look at as a possibility. I think if you speak to anyone at Liverpool at the moment about this, they're very much, well, we've not got a vacancy there. You know, we need to sell Luis Diaz before anything happens there, and that's absolutely right. But I get the impression with Rodrygo that they're at least kind of sounding things out and checking what a deal would look like, which is something they've done with several players, by the way, who they've not signed this window. So, you know, he might be on the long list is maybe where we would put it at the moment. And then if Diaz is to go, we might see some acceleration there, but it's tough to pick who that left winger would be at the moment. And I don't think anything is particularly advanced, despite, you know, some of the reports really ramping that up. I think it's just kind of initial contact on player side to assess the lay of the land, really.
Another name, while we're on that left side, that has been in reports again, I think Laquette had something on it this morning, is Wesley Fofana. Malik Fofana. That one's come up again as one. I think we spoke about that one again last week as almost like it's probably the long list is the way you just described it. He's probably another one that may be on that long list. You could see him being someone that Liverpool are watching because he's playing in a top European league for a top club. And he's a left-sided profile. He's a standout player in their side. I don't suppose you've heard anything new on that, but it'd be remiss of me not to ask you, seeing as the reports were circulating on him today.
Yeah, got to say, you know, I think sometimes it's just worth saying that sometimes when you don't know about one, and I just with this one, I've not really been given anything that makes me think there's anything in this at the moment. Like you say, they'll definitely be watching him because of age, where he's playing in a strong league and doing well at a very young age. But I haven't personally heard anything on this one. Maybe he does come onto the agenda at some point in this window, but at the moment, it's all kind of quiet on that one. I've not personally heard anything.
And I think that's us. I think we've been around everything there, and we've done it in about 56 minutes, so we can be quite happy with that. What's your plans for this week then? Is there anything that you're preparing, anything you're working on that people are going to look together? I know you're not going. Well, I assume you're not going to Hong Kong, so I'm thinking you're just going to be around as normal.
Yeah, unfortunately not. It's a tough one to fund as a freelancer, those kind of trips, unfortunately. So I'm missing out on that. But yeah, seeing what's happening on the tour, keeping across transfers as usual. And yeah, very reactive in this period of time. You don't really ever know what's kind of coming because it's, you know, the transfer window's crazy. But yeah, if people want to check out YouTube, David Lynch LFC, Substack, davidlynchlfc.co.uk, and I am, of course, now on TikTok, aren't I? So yes, I'm possibly the oldest man on TikTok. If you want to check, that's David Lynch LFC as well. And I won't be dancing on there, guys,
or playing any guitars.
Yeah,
it was kind of a funny one, right? Because my son, he's 12 and he has absolutely zero interest in football. He's not into sport at all. He says he was going through his internet stuff the other day, and obviously there's a computer in the house that we share, and he went on his TikTok and he paused it and he shouted, "Dad!" I went up. I said, "Oh, what now? Something's broken. The sound won't be working on his computer or something. He's pressed mute or something." He says, "Do you know that, man?" He says, "Yeah, it was you."
That's great. That's great.
He was watching his TikToks, and he's into like Roblox stuff and all of these sort of things. And he's like, "Do you know that, man?" It's like he was so enthused that our worlds had collided just for that brief moment in time. And of course, TikTok is the catalyst to that.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to know I'm going viral on there already. That's good to hear.
Yeah, the 12-year-olds that have no interest in football, David. That's your new demographic. Okay, thanks everyone for watching. There's been 2,500 of you watching this, so thank you for joining us this afternoon. We realise you have a choice in what fan media content you consume, and we're honoured and privileged that you decided to spend it with us, and for all the comments that have come in. Most of them I've read or put on the screen. I will go through them more. I know when we see the comments back to the replays on this, there are some slightly less complimentary comments, should I say. David and I are used to that. We wouldn't be in this game without the thick skin that we have to have, and maybe we could just have 1 week without the David Lynch knows nothing, David Lynch is a blagger, David Lynch is a spoofer, because he's just giving you the information he has when he knows it, and that's all we ask of him, and that's why he produces this show every week. So we thank him for coming along, and there were a couple of comments as well that said I spoke too much as well, so hopefully I've spoke a little bit less. But this podcast is designed to be a debate, a two-way thing, a conversation. It's not just designed to be a blanket interview where I say, David, Isak, speak. You know what I mean? That's not the way, that's not kind of the way we do things here. Anfield Index is a very conversational platform. So if we do talk too much or the host talk too much, then maybe it's not the right channel for you. And that's not to be offensive in any way, but that's just the way we like to produce content here. So Dave Davis will be back next week. He'll be back actually, I think, from tomorrow. So if anything else breaks, and if there is another Media Matters with David Lynch this week, it will probably be Dave Davis at the helm. So thanks to everyone for watching. And until next time, up the Reds.